What's up? It's time to rank every main victim in Saw 3. Analyzing each character's skills, decisions, and mentality to determine how well they performed here, and more importantly, how they do in other horror movies. This time, the Jigsaw Killer has once again devised an elaborate plan to expose himself as a hypocrite, kidnapping people and then forcing a man who hates them to decide if they should live or die, instead of giving them a chance to save themselves, culminating in a decision that permanently alters the course of the franchise. We start the film right after the events of Saw 2, with Detective Eric Matthews still trapped in the same nasty-ass bathroom Amanda left him in, the same one from the first Saw movie. They're really getting every penny out of that disgusting-ass petri dish. Fortunately for Eric though, Amanda left him a flashlight just beyond his reach, allowing Eric to reveal an adequate level of resourcefulness as he makes use of his shoe to grab it. However, his intelligence fails to increase any further as he continues yelling for his son Daniel, completely unaware of the last film's big twist and still not analyzing all the information he's received, simply continuing down his narrow-minded path. This dude's always talking about some Daniel. He needs another hobby. Taking my advice, Eric grabs the nearby hacksaw in hopes of becoming a woodworker, but can't muster the resolve to complete his first carving by cutting off his own leg, so he instead displays slightly less resolve but even more ingenuity as he grabs a toilet lid before repeatedly bashing it into his foot, somehow breaking his bones into a powder fine enough that he can slide out of the chain. You might as well just cut it off at that point. A few months later, a squad of police bursts into a classroom, a sight all too familiar for American schools. This time though, they find the aftermath of a jigsaw trap, so they call in resident jigsaw expert Detective Allison Carey to examine the clues and find out what really happened. Flashing back a few hours earlier, a man named Troy finds himself experiencing much more extreme BDSM roleplay than he ever thought possible. Luckily for him though, he reveals some resolve as he rips the chains from his limbs, only to become a human jigsaw puzzle when he fails to pull the last link attached to his jaw before the time expires and detonates a bomb. How the hell are you supposed to rip off your own jaw and survive? Back to the present, eventual asshole Detective Hoffman trivializes Troy's challenge, claiming that he simply had to remove his chains and walk out the door.
All he had to do was release himself from each of the chains.
But Officer Rigg knows differently.
All he had to do?
Yeah, let's see you survive a jigsaw trap involving your jaw, Detective Hoffman. Showing some perceptiveness, Rigg questions how Jigsaw managed to set up the trap when he appeared so weak in the last film. Carey though displays some deduction when she realizes that Jigsaw likely didn't personally execute this trap because the door to escape was sealed off, contradicting the entire point of Jigsaw's games by removing any chance of survival. Later that night, Carey analyzes Troy's tape, but the television suddenly changes to a live recording of her room, and after waving her hand to confirm, she displays some caution by grabbing her gun and shooting towards the camera. When she goes to grab it, however, her awareness fails her as someone sneaks up from behind and abducts her. Now waking up in a jigsaw trap, Carey must stick her hand into a vat of acid to retrieve a key so she can release herself from the harness connected to her ribcage. Despite demonstrating the necessary resolve though, the key doesn't work, and the trap kills her anyway, leaving the intelligent investigator with inside-out intestines in B tier. Sometime later, we meet Surgeon Lynn Denlin. That's too many N's. No racial. After getting called to the trauma room, Lynn does the same thing every movie or TV doctor does when they want to make them look impressive. That is, correcting the other lead doctor doing things by the book and then finding some obscure but misleading detail that saves the patient's life. When she tries to leave though, she somehow finds herself alone in the locker room of this seemingly busy hospital, allowing one of Jigsaw's apprentices to kidnap and bring her to his mysterious warehouse. Once there, Amanda rolls Lynn into some crusty ass room, where she comes face to face with Jigsaw himself. And I'm not gonna lie, Amanda has so much more aura in this one. She always had on a frightened face in the last one, constantly jumping at everything. But not this time. Amanda then places Lynn into a shotgun collar, a device that will kill her if Jigsaw's heart rate reaches 0, forcing her to keep him alive until someone else completes a series of tests. Unbeknownst to Lynn though, the contestant in question is her husband Jeff, who's been fantasizing about vengeance since their son was killed by a drunk driver 3 years ago, and has now been tasked by Jigsaw to forgive those he holds responsible, explicitly stated on tape.
That will be your ultimate test. Can you forgive him?
In the first room, Jeff encounters the woman who witnessed his son's death but didn't testify in court. To save her life, he simply has to reach beyond some pipes to retrieve a key and unlock her chains before she dies of frostbite. However, Jeff's lazy ass just stands there until she turns into a popsicle, at which point Jeff finally decides to get the key, but experiences the consequences of his slowness when he can't even insert the key through all of the ice now covering the lock. You might as well have done nothing if you were gonna wait that long. Meanwhile, Lynn examines Jigsaw and tells Amanda that he needs to go to a hospital, but Amanda not only refuses her request, but creates such a toxic environment that her supervisor has to step in, forcing out so much of the measly strength he has left that he starts seizing. In a contrast of composure and urgency, Lynn immediately rushes to help him, while Amanda freezes. Luckily though, Lynn manages to overcome Amanda's ineffectiveness and stabilizes Jigsaw, but much like anything worthwhile at a fast food joint, only for a limited time. Now needing to perform brain surgery in this nasty ass warehouse, Lynn looks for a power drill, but shows the faintest hint of ruthlessness as she also looks for a weapon, only for Amanda to appear and show her pettiness when she hands Lynn an axe and turns around. Amanda then explains that even if she does kill her, she'll still be in a terrible and likely even worse situation, revealing Lynn's foresight and self-preservation when she abandons any attempt to kill Amanda while in such a disadvantageous position. Jeff, meanwhile, begins his next test, encountering the judge who gave his son's killer a light sentence. Bound to the floor, the judge begins drowning as a machine force feeds him pig corpses turned into juice. This is how black people do you when you say you don't want to eat chitlins. We are not slaves anymore. We don't have to eat that. To free the judge, Jeff just has to burn his dead son's old belongings, but despite the judge's attempts to plead for his life, Jeff's slow and selfish ass takes forever to do it. When he finally does though, he grabs the key from the demonic vending machine and goes to release the judge, facing the consequences of his slow decision making by having to now climb through this deep pool of pig guts. With Jeff now moving towards his next test, Lynn begins brain surgery on Jigsaw, once again showing strong composure, especially in contrast to Amanda, who seems hesitant to approach such a bloody scene despite administering so-called games that usually demand a person eviscerate their own body. It's different when it's someone you care about, huh? What a hypocrite. Just when Lynn thinks she successfully finished the surgery, Jigsaw's heart stops, and Amanda again shows poor composure with unhelpful screams questioning Lynn, who still reacts calmly and quickly brings him back to life. Jigsaw, though, now in a state of confusion, tells Lynn that he loves her, leading to Amanda making this face. Oh, she mad. So mad, in fact, that she chokes and then pulls a gun on Lynn when there's already a whole collar of guns on Lynn. Jigsaw, though, tells her to stop, so Amanda stomps away like a child sent into timeout, so angry that she starts bleeding from gripping her tool too hard. And no, that's not a euphemism. Finally confronting his son's killer, Timothy Young, Jeff must yet again retrieve a key to unlock a trap, this time forced to do so while standing in front of a shotgun. As Jeff contemplates whether to help the man he hates, the trap slowly twists each of his limbs until they snap. Yeah, that limb is cooked. The judge, though, shows some proactiveness and caution by analyzing how to retrieve the key, but then abandons this line of thought and tries to stop the trap with his hands. Bro, that's not gonna work! Dude's telling him to hold on while his limbs are turning into dry spaghetti. Grab the damn key! Listening to my advice, Jeff finally decides to do something and secures the key, which also pulls the trigger and kills the judge, whose poor awareness led to him aimlessly standing in front of a live shotgun. Now ready to save Timothy, Jeff looks for the lock, but fails to locate it before the trap turns Timothy's head enough to kill even an owl. Who? With Jeff's third test now finished, Jigsaw starts roasting Lynn for cheating on her husband, making use of his patronizing tone to get under her skin.
Wives on their backs in hotel rooms with perfect strangers, till death do us part, indeed.
Lynn, however, gets back at Jigsaw by calling him the one thing he hates to be a part of.
A murderer.
I don't condone murder, and I despise murderers.
You despise murderers? You are a murderer! And you put people in games that incentivize or downright require them to kill people. What do you think you did with Amanda? Jigsaw then grabs Lynn's hand just as Amanda walks in, telling Amanda that they don't need her, much to the chagrin of Lynn, who has the emotional awareness to recognize how such an action will push Amanda even further down the descent into violence. Oh, she big mad. So mad, in fact, that when Jigsaw tells her to let Lynn go, she refuses, instead cocking back the gun and talking to Jigsaw like a toddler.
I said no!
As Jigsaw tries to warn Amanda that Lynn has some unknown power over her, Amanda just continues spiraling, repeatedly threatening to kill Lynn with the same words a barber says when he's working on your hairline.
Stop fucking moving around!
Now wondering how dark she's become, Jigsaw asks about her previous subjects, flashing back to Eric Matthews after he escaped the bathroom. Showing strong determination, Eric continues yelling for Daniel as he searches through this underground labyrinth of sewage while walking on his nasty-ass, likely infected foot. Amanda, however, is inside the tunnels as well, apparently terrified of this crippled cop, but as she tries to sneak around him, he reveals the effects of his awareness with a sneak attack before beating her so hard I thought her head would pop. Despite his aggressive interrogation though, Amanda shows her resolve and doesn't tell him anything about Daniel, instead kicking him in his nasty ass foot and walking away. How in the world did she survive those hits? Let alone maintain consciousness. As Amanda continues walking away, Eric displays his pettiness and antagonizes her by screaming out that she's not Jigsaw.
You're not Jigsaw!
Drawing out her rage and forcing her back into the tunnels, likely to kill him. Shouldn't have said anything. Leaving the crippled cop who calls out for his kid in B tier. Back to the present, Amanda contemplates killing Lynn, ignoring Jigsaw's warnings, despite knowing that while he speaks in cryptic riddles, he has a strong code and rarely lies. With Jigsaw's final plea also failing to change her mind, Amanda shoots Lynn just as she runs into Jeff, who shows his vindictiveness and shoots Amanda, who kinda just ignored him walking into the room. Like, I know she didn't know Jeff was Lynn's husband, but she didn't even acknowledge this random dude walking into the room? With Amanda now bleeding to death, Jigsaw tells her that this was really her game, that he wanted to test her desire to keep someone alive despite the fact that the first thing he ever asked her to do was kill someone. Hypocrite. Let's talk about Amanda. Amanda might have gained aura, but she lost her composure, acting even more frantic than she did in the first film, so much so that even John Kramer himself had to say it.
Her emotion is also her weakness.
Amanda displays a sense of superiority over her victims, especially Lynn, who she constantly antagonizes for no reason other than to indulge her own pettiness. Most critically though, she fails to heed Jigsaw's warnings against killing Lynn, despite knowing the importance of his words, displaying a lack of forethought that would likely result in similarly poor performances in other horror movies. I do know, however, that her decisions may have been influenced by blackmail, as revealed in later films, but she still disregarded Jigsaw's words at the risk of her own life, ultimately resulting in a character with few positives beyond ruthlessness, and leaving the upset apprentice with upgraded aura in D tier. With the apprentice now dead, Jeff points his gun at Jigsaw, who's just so annoyed at this man who's learned nothing after all of his tests. I just love Tobin Bell's subtle sigh and eye roll here. He's just so done with this dude. Jigsaw then tells Jeff to reconsider killing him, telling him to think about his family, but Jeff ignores him and doesn't analyze the situation at all, completely disregarding the strange device around his wife's neck and believing he has the power in this situation even after all the traps Jigsaw has already put him through. Like, Jigsaw literally tells him that Lynn will die if he tries to move her. That doesn't make you think. Now giving him his final test, Jigsaw tells Jeff that he can either kill or forgive him, and Jeff, not prioritizing his wife's life, not questioning the consequences of going against someone with such elaborate plans, not having learned to control his desire for vengeance, decides to kill Jigsaw. Now having failed his last test of forgiveness, Jigsaw plays a tape that tells Jeff he kidnapped his daughter, with nobody else knowing her location. As Jigsaw flatlines, Lynn's caller kills her and the doors around them lock, leaving Jeff trapped. Time to rank. Starting off with Lynn, oh we'll get to Jeff. Lynn had a much stronger performance than I initially expected. She managed to thoroughly outdo her husband despite far worse circumstances, making use of her impressive composure, dexterity, and awareness to complete a seemingly impossible task, with her only dying due to the flaws of those around her. Though she probably could have spoken a little bit louder to warn Jeff about what should have been obvious. Her medical knowledge would likely help her in group dynamics as well, potentially saving her allies and raising her status among other members. She even has good emotional intelligence, understanding how to placate these sadistic killers for at least a little while before ultimately falling victim to their cruelty, leaving the skilled surgeon with a scrambled skull in A tier. Finally, we have Jeff, and he's so dumb. Jeff has some of the easiest tests in the entire franchise, but still fails nearly all of them because he does basically nothing at a high or even average level. But his most critical flaw is his complete inability to understand the situation. Time after time, he fails to recognize what he needs to do until he is told directly. Much like Amanda, he lacks forethought, deciding to indulge his immediate desires before understanding the consequences of such actions, ultimately leading to his wife falling victim to the most obvious death trap in history. Jeff does, however, display a willingness to kill, which can prove useful in similarly life-threatening situations. Overall though, his wife probably cheated on him so she could find someone with a rating in the same half as hers, leaving the babbling buffoon with bad breath in F tier. But that's it. The average ranking for this cast was C tier. Very average collection of characters, with the ultimate survivor going to Lynn for her strong composure under pressure, and the first kill going to Jeff for basically everything he does and doesn't do. Thanks for watching.